Hello, this is Stephen Hour, and yes, we're back with another movie review. It's been a long time since we've done this series, but I'm really glad to be back because, ladies and gentlemen, we will be reviewing John Wick, released in 2014. Before we get into the plot and into the cast, let's get into a little bit about this film's background. John Wick is a neo-noir action thriller that was directed by Chad Stahelski in his directorial debut, and the film comes from the screenplay by Derek Kolstad. It stars Keanu Reeves, and this was like Keanu Reeves' like big career comeback, as really he was more of a product of the 90s or early 2000s. This film kind of brought him back into the public eye, and this film is the first installment of the John Wick franchise, and it's kicked off with so far 3 films, soon to be 4 in the series lineup. For the most part, most of these films have been good hits at the box office and done well critically. Now the question is, does it still deserve the critical reception that this film still deserve the critical reception that it got way back in 2014? Well, before we get into that and my agreement on the synopsis, let's get into the cast. The cast for this film, of course, has Keanu Reeves in the role of John Wick. I say the John Wick series is synonymous with Keanu Reeves because he is not only the main lead, but he is like, when you think of John Wick, you think of Keanu Reeves. This was his big career comeback, as honestly, like, I've heard of him, but I never really saw much of his work, despite the fact he was best remembered for The Matrix. But when these films came out and people were saying, oh, it's great, I decided, well, let's have a look, okay? I will have a watch, see if I like it. And I will say, for the most part, he is arguably one of the best aspects. John Wick is an assassin, a hired killer, who really is very humble about his reputation, and almost has a elegance of dignity, but you can tell that, he's a really brutal fighter that you do not want to mess with. The main villain in the first John Wick film is Viggo Tarasova, portrayed by Michael Vengrist. Probably butchering that name, and of course he's joined with his son, Azov, played by Elif Ellen. Probably butchering those names, but basically it's a father and son. The father is a notorious crime boss, head of the local Russian mafia, and his son is an arrogant, like, prick-type character who views he's entitled because of his dad. Ironically, the son causes all the trouble that a lot of these characters have to deal with. Again, they play the roles almost what you would expect, but they are, I guess you'd say, characters that are just, I would say, average at best. But of course, another character I really like in this film series is Winston, portrayed by Ian McShane. Honestly, he's like this old school, head of what's known as the Continental Hotel. Essentially, a go-to hotel where all hitmen and hitwomen can go and stay. He has this sort of like businessman type allure to him. Winston, Wick has a great deal of respect for him, and he has this sort of thing that makes people not just fear but respect his authority. And he's always accompanied by really his second in command, Charon, portrayed by Lance Reddick. Again, another great casting choice, and he's just so great in this role. And I don't think anyone else can really live up to, what he really live up to it. I find it hard to believe that anyone else could have played these roles. These actors are so good and so great with these roles. Miss Perkins, as a female hitwoman, portrayed by Ardarena Palika, probably butchering her name, I'm very sorry. Basically, she's this hitwoman who sides with Viggo to get this great deal of respect and great deal of, not really much respect, but because this bounty was such a high price, she switches allegiance despite the fact it's against the rules to conduct business, basically do a hit on continental grounds. We have, of course, Willem Dafoe in this film, portraying Marcus, essentially a hitman from the old guard, a battle-weary and hardened assassin that he and John Wick have had dealings with the past. I like to imagine the two have actually done hits when they were both coming up in the ranks. That's at least my theory. We also have the character of Irello, portrayed by John Leguizamo, probably butchering the man's name. I'm so sorry. And basically, he runs a chop shop. And when he realizes that what the characters, Isavo and his crew have done, how they've stolen a car from a great hitman, killed his dog, and left him alive, he knows for a fact, that he just unleashed hell on the entire criminal underworld. And he kind of gets emotion, really, even though ISF really did the act, this guy gets things in motion when he basically realized what this punk kid has done to the entire criminal, milieu, the society, and I love him for that. Now, normally there is a bigger cast, and who knows, I really should, do more, but this is the cast that's really the most important to the film, and honestly, I like it that, it's for the most part, it's a really small knit cast, not too big. There's other important ones as well, like there's the cleaner, and of course, Viggo's number 2 man, his right-hand man, but for the most part, this is the tight-knit group, really, that should be associated with this film. And it's a great cast. It is brilliant. All these actors are phenomenal in the role and give such great dialogues. In fact, that's one of my favorite bits about the film is the dialogue. And who knows, I might explain that maybe a little bit more later on in the review. The plot of the film revolves around a former retired hitman named John Wick, who, after losing his wife Helena to a terminal illness, he receives a puppy named Daisy that Helen has arranged to send before she died as a way to help cope with his grief. Just as John Wick is, coping, a gangster's kid's son, ends up killing the dog and stealing his car after John Wick refused to sell the car first when they met at a gas station. Only he has no idea who he has just hurt. As a result of that, when word gets out that this kid has essentially done this to John Wick and is technically still alive, John Wick comes out of retirement to take revenge on the man who killed his dog and stole his car. It's a pretty basic, it's a pretty simple plot. A gangster, essentially a hitman coming out for revenge. That's the essential plot. And basically every gangster basically fears of John Wick coming out of retirement to take his revenge. Some of the best moments of this film has, and essentially is well known for having, is some of the greatest choreographed fight scenes in modern history. The film's fight scenes takes a lot of its inspiration from karate films, or martial art films I should rather say, and of course anime. The fight choreography is just legendary, and Keanu Reeves absolutely, really makes you believe of these fight scenes. Not just that, but also the gunplay, with like the bullets flying and, how he has to quickly unload and reload. It's just all great. And honestly, even though that is probably the best highlights of the film, there is so much more. First off, the cinematography and the atmosphere just makes you feel that we are in a different kind of criminal world. We've seen that in many films like The Godfather, Goodfellas, other criminal society worlds that we've been inhabited before. But this is different. This feels more sophisticated, more like these criminals that we're seeing have a sense of almost, I like to say, dignity. And it's also a secretive criminal society on the highest levels, and something that we would explore in later future sequels. Another thing that I really love about this film is, of course, how John Wick is. John Wick, for the most part, is an assassin, but he plays John Wick like even though he has this big reputation, he's very humble about it and doesn't like to really boast about his big reputation, and also how other characters react with him. Like they fear him, some are in admiration of him, some of them just view him as, like a guy next door that they've, have encountered with before. Even the main villain is scared of him, which is rare. Normally, that rarely happens. And the fact he has this big allure, this myth, especially when, they reveal that his nickname is Baba Yaga, which is Russian for the boogeyman, and this one line sets him up for the whole film. And, it's almost like, for me, this is how I'd imagine the Punisher would be if he was a full-blown criminal or full-blown gangster, not so much as an anti-hero. Another thing I also love is some of the many supporting characters that we get in this film. Such as the character of um like Vigo, who is the main villain. But even though he's a feared gangster in his own right, you get the impression that um for the most part, like, he fears John Wick, which is normal because he's the type of character that puts fear in you. Miss Perkins is a very interesting female, contract killer that, does basically, whatever allegiance is to her own. Winston is another great character. He has a sort of allure of old school film noirs, and basically is the owner of the Continental Hotel, which is a hotel where contract killers go to stay, and it's a place, that John Wick has definitely had experience with before. Aurelio is a small role, but you get the impression that he and John Wick have had business with the past and see each other as equals. Same as Marcos, an assassin from the old guard who is, very almost as feared as John Wick. Like, there is just so many great supporting characters here. I just can't name them all. In fact, I think I need a whole video just to do that because it is just so great. Even the minor roles that some of these characters are just so, like, great. And I don't think we get to see that, like, where supporting characters are just as great and just integral to the movie as the main leads. And honestly, there's really nothing bad I could say about this film. Now, like I said before, there's nothing really bad, full-blown bad I could say about this film, but it's really more of a criticism. And that is the plot. I'm sorry, but now, I've got nothing wrong with having a simple plot, a kill out for revenge. We've seen that in many films, and for the most part, this is a pretty good one. But the thing that is, he's basically doing all this because some guy stole his car and killed his dog. If you really think about it, that's the general premise. This guy would have been nothing, stayed at home if not for the not have happened of circumstances. It does feel a little bit a coincidence, or I'm not even sure what the word would be. Again, not coincidence, but it's just surprising, I would say, or something similar to that. Anyway, but like I said, it's not a terrible moment or a bad moment in the film like I've had in other films. It's just a little nitpick, a criticism. But despite that, it does not hurt the film. In fact, it makes it, for me, actually pretty good if you really think about it. Because it is just, for me, it's such a bizarre concept, but the execution of it works so well. And that's all I can say. Again, it's a criticism, not a fault. It's a criticism, not a bad moment that makes or breaks the film. In conclusion, how do I rank, or what is my final verdict on the first John Wick film? Well, my final verdict is 5 out of 5 stars. Despite the criticism with the plot, like I mentioned, this is a really great film. Great action sequences, great written dialogue, great cinematography, and overall just a unique, captivating world that we rarely get in crime films anymore. I'd say this is the closest we got to a more modern crime film. But overall, this is a really film I highly recommend you watch. You can find it on Netflix, Stan, Paramount Plus, I think. Anyway, get your hands on the first John Wick film. It is an absolute fun ride. Anyway, that was the review of the first John Wick film. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Please write your own list in the comments. I plan to do another series in regards to my film review series, as reviewing sequels. As some of the films I've done actually do have sequels, and I do plan to at least review them, as I do feel they do need their own, continuation. So anyway, join us next time in the Stephen Hour review film series with the next film on the list, Baby Driver. coming up soon, probably next month. But until then, this has been the Steven Hour. Ladies and gentlemen, so long for now.